Have you ever wondered how often a negotiator might be successful? That means how often they're actually utilizing the real potential in a negotiation. Imagine that you and I are sitting watching people negotiate, and you and I know that they can actually manage to reach an agreement, but they don't know that. So they're actually just sitting there negotiating. So the big question is, how often are they going to be successful? Will it be 1 out of 10? Will it be 5 out of 10? Will it be 9 out of 10? Let me show you a very simple study we've done. Let's assume that we have two parties negotiating about buying or selling this piece of art up here. So we have this painting, and obviously what we got is we have a sales rep that want to sell this painting, and we got a buyer, the purchaser, who want to buy it. So obviously we have eliminated the first problem already because there's a buyer who want to buy and a seller who want to sell. So that problem has been eliminated. In this case, we only have one variable left, and that is the price. And as you can see, we have a case here where we have the sales rep that has a limit of 110. So that is the threshold of pain. That is the maximum that the sales rep can actually go down to. And we have a purchase on the other side that has a limit of a maximum of 123. So that is the threshold of pain for the purchaser. That is the maximum that they can pay. So in between the two parties, obviously, we have a total amount of money that is 13,000. So there is sufficient room for the two parties to reach an agreement, right? Now, the big question is, we've been doing this and conducting this study in hundreds and hundreds of examples and cases just to see how often is it that these two parties actually reach an agreement. And I would like you just take a second, pause this video and think about how often would you actually guess that they will reach an agreement. So in percentage out of 10 negotiations, how often do you think they will reach an agreement? And in theory, it should basically be 100%, right? Because we can see that the numbers makes it possible, and we have a buyer who want to buy and a seller that want to sell. The actual number is that 9 out of 10 is actually reaching an agreement. So that means that they reach an agreement in between the 123 and the 110. When I present this to audience, I very often meet people that are saying, well, that's pretty good, isn't it? And I very often respond by saying, no, it's actually terrible. Because in this case, we actually have only 90% who are successful, and we have 10% who messes up. So 10% will leave this negotiation and tell their colleagues at home it wasn't possible to reach an agreement. But as we know, it is actually possible. Let me make this a little bit more realistic. Let's go into the real world. And in the real world, obviously, we have way more variables than just the price. And we could be talking about a very complicated piece of machinery as this one up here. And the total price could be a combination of price, terms of payment, delivery time, cost of production, availability, installation, maintenance, whatever. We could actually have 20, 30, 40, 60 variables in this case. And identical to the previous simple negotiation I showed you, this is the same case. We know, you and I, that the parties sitting in this negotiation can actually reach an agreement. They don't know that. And the same question as before, how often do you think in this case the two parties will be able to reach an agreement? Now we have the financial area where we can see that it's possible for them to reach an agreement, because in this case, as you can see, we have a number where the sales rep has a limit of 11 million and we have a purchaser who got a limit of 12.8. So that means in between the two numbers, obviously, we have 1.8 million, sufficient enough to actually reach an agreement. So the question is, how often are they going to reach that agreement? And in this case, it's 75% who might be successful. Some of you might again be thinking, well, this is great, isn't it? And I would just repeat myself and say, no, it's actually terrible, because you got 25% who are leaving this negotiation claiming that it was not possible to reach a solution. And yes, it is possible to reach a possible outcome in this case, as you can see, but the parties don't know how. This is what happens in real life, especially if you negotiate in zero sum. You may leave a negotiation that you could potentially be very successful in, but you don't think it is possible at all to reach that potential outcome. Let me just list very quickly some of the reasons that we actually fail in these cases. One of them could be prestige. So relationship is not working perfectly. We are not listening to the counterpart. And this is one of the key items that I see very often could be a potential problem. So we are missing openings in this negotiation. We have misunderstanding or conflicts that are created during negotiation. We're not being open, so we are holding back information. We're not sharing cost and values. So we have a big lack of dialogue. We have basically incompetent communicators. And as I've been saying in a lot of our modules, if you don't know how to communicate, you certainly don't know how to communicate. Perhaps the negotiators are too focused on price, so they actually don't see the whole negotiation and the full potential. Another risk could be that they simply don't have the knowledge in negotiation, so they don't know how to get out of zero sum and negotiate in partnership or smartnership. They could be locked into one solution, so that means they're focused on something before they get started. It could be very poor preparation, so they don't really know the cost or the benefit in individual variables, or they might have lack of trust, so one or both sides might be bluffing or lying in this case. So what I'm claiming is that we have a huge unutilized potential in a commercial transaction that isn't being used. And we know that 1/3 of all negotiators actually fails. And what we know is that out of those who actually are successful, uses only 6% of that potential that could generate an additional value. And that is why we're claiming that such a huge unused potential is lying out there on the conference table without neither the parties have seen it, capitalized it, or utilized this amount of value. Now, this is actually a slide I'm using currently at a real life client. And what we're seeing is that they have a number of existing variables, and then we have the huge potential of the unused variables out here. One of the small secrets in actually identifying additional value in a negotiation is negotiating on more variables that you typically would. And we know that typically a lot of industries and businesses are negotiating on the same variables as they did last year and 10 years ago and 30 years ago and 50 years ago. It's the same variables they're still negotiating on. And quite often they're negotiating on too few variables. That means if we expand the amount of variables that we could focus on and negotiate on, we had a big opportunity of actually generalizing or utilizing that value that might be hidden in there. So what are the requirements for collaboration? Well, it sounds very simple on the slide up here, but one of the requirements is obviously a well-functioning personal chemistry based on trust and openness. And I know it sounds very simple because obviously you can't step into a meeting, shake the hand of the counterpart and said, I would love openness and honesty. And the counterpart would say, so would I. And there you go. Then you have openness and trust. That's not how we do that. So it's obviously not that simple, but it is a requirement in order to become successful. Both parties must believe that collaboration will give us a better negotiation outcome. You do find negotiation approaches out there where you find negotiators that believe that a combative behavior is superior to collaboration. Now, if you meet that kind of counterpart, it's obviously difficult to convince them about something else. Then it's also a requirement that we have rational and skillful negotiators. If you don't know the art of how to negotiate, you're not going to be successful. Are you good at playing any kind of sports? For instance, tennis. I'm playing tennis myself. I'm not very good at it. But what is really interesting is that when I'm playing towards somebody who is worse than I am, and that's really hard because I'm not that good, but if I'm playing against somebody who's worse than I am, I almost always lose the game. And you know why? I get so annoyed and frustrated that they don't have any idea on how to play the game. But on the other hand, when I meet somebody that is way superior to me, it's actually a joy for me to play. And I become even better because I just enjoy looking at the art, what they can do and how they play. The same thing happens in negotiation. If you meet a negotiator who are just incompetent, it actually makes the whole thing really complicated. Well-functioning communication, as I mentioned a couple of times, is really crucial as well. And then generosity. We need to be able to accept that the counterpart could be successful and they could even be more successful than you. But if you are happy with your outcome, why would their success be annoying to you? Now look at conflict resolution as well. When we are dealing with a conflict, some kind of disagreement, we can negotiate our way out of it or we can use mediation. That is typically something where we can maintain trust and even build trust. But if we move into arbitration, tribunals, ombudsman or commission or even court system, obviously we are going to reduce trust for the simple reason that there's going to be a loser and a winner. Unfortunately, I meet sometimes negotiator who comes to me and say, well, if we can't agree something in the conference room on this conflict, we just go to court. And I have to remind them that in most cases, it's only the attorneys involved in the court case that are the real winners. The two parties is actually not going to win, because a court ruling in most situations is actually declaring one a winner and the other one a loser. And if we have a loser, both parties are really losing, because do you think the two parties would like to rejoin and continue our collaboration? I doubt it. So think about when you are in any potential kind of conflicts, and that could happen even in the best possible partnership, you have to identify how you want to deal with that potential conflict. I guess that most of you that have been studying economics at one point know this model up here, that strategy multiplied by action gives you result. And I allow myself to disagree with this model up here, because I honestly believe that strategy multiplied by action multiplied by trust will give the real result that we would like to see in any kind of collaboration.